My name is Michael Rubino.
I'm on a personal mission to make sure you don't get sick inside your own home.
I knew there was something wrong. I'm just so relieved there's something that you can do about it.
Hey everyone, thank you for joining me with another episode of Never Been Sicker. I'm your host, Michael Rubino, and today I have a very special guest. You might not understand why I have this guest on right away, but just trust me, as we sit in here and as the interview goes on, I think it'll make a lot of sense. Today's amazing guest is Kerim Kfuri. We have he's the supply chain excellence of the Atlas Network and pioneer in global logistics solutions. He discovers supply chain excellence because of the Atlas Network, and he's a pioneer in global logistics solutions. Kerim, thank you so much for being on here today and for sharing your time with us. I know your time is very valuable. You're a very busy guy, so really appreciate that. Just let everybody know anything else you'd like to share about yourself and why you're here.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Michael. Appreciate it. Thank you for having me on the show. It's a great show and a great concept of your show. As you said, my name is Kerim Kfuri. I'm the president and CEO of the Atlas Network, which is a global supply chain solutions company. We've been operating in the United States and abroad for 2 decades, pretty much, with the intention of making ideas into reality, helping small, mid, and large-sized businesses avoid expensive mistakes, and to really do things with a slant towards improving quality, improving efficiency, and best practices, really. And I think that's really what much of the world, especially in the realm of the supply chain industry, has been striving towards. The pandemic and so forth really spotlighted this industry, and as a result, I think we all have a duty to continue to make it a better place. And that's kind of what I think we can talk about a little bit here on your show.
Yeah, and I'd love to, just kind of circle back up to the pandemic. Obviously, I think anybody who understands supply chains and what happens with supply chains understood that the COVID pandemic, no matter the industry, disrupted supply chains across the globe, right? And so especially for me, a lot of the stuff that we use in our business, manufacturers stopped making them because they needed those materials for masks and other life-saving products that were being mass produced at that time. So there was some massive supply chain disruptions. I mean, I don't think things have fully gone back to normal, but would love to hear, some insight from you on where things are 4 years later after the pandemic, how things are getting better, and what people are doing, to obviously there's been a big push to try to bring some manufacturing to the US, for example. Would love to just hear some insights from you on how things have improved since the pandemic and where you see things going from that aspect.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to global supply chain, it's very important to understand that disruptions are going to be a part of that. And that could be through, natural disasters. It could be through a health crisis like the pandemic we saw. It could be based upon political shifts and changes that could impact the relationship between nations, scarcity when it comes to certain materials. There's so many things, so many elements that cannot even be controlled just on the manufacturing or the logistical side, but more so are these, the variables where the only real consistency is that there is always going to be inconsistency. And with that in mind, I mean, I did write a book, which is called Supply Chain Ups and Downs, which basically talks exactly about this, the fact that this is a bumpy ride. It's just innately going to be an industry where you have to be ready to adapt, pivot, change, at a moment's notice. Things just happen every single day across the globe that may or may not impact what it is that you do, or even your experience as a consumer. When you go into that store and you don't see products on the shelves or the prices start to skyrocket and you want to know, kind of why that is, there's probably a significant amount of underlying factors that you may not even considered that are impacting why you may not have that item for the holidays or that product when you really, kind of need it the most. So, with that in mind, it's always been our goal here at the Atlas Network to educate our customers. And now I do a lot of thought leadership through my podcast, the Supply and Demand Show, through my YouTube channel, through the books and materials and conferences that I attend, about how to take advantage of the global economy and how we can really do this in a proper and safe way that benefits consumer economy, but at the same time, our world at large. So, that's really kind of the focal point as to our approach towards this industry and how we look to navigate it. You mentioned several different things. We can talk about each of these different items separately, but holistically, the point is that supply chains need to be resilient. So how do you make sure that they are resilient and adaptable? Well, you always have to have sort of a plan A, B, C, and D. You always have to expect the unexpected. You always have to forecast ahead, not just 1 month or 3 months, 6 months, but maybe even a year ahead. Because when you're dealing in the global economic and global manufacturing space, nothing happens that quickly. And you need to build in not just the time, but also all that dummy time and then all that unexpected stuff happening time, which tends to happen. So you have to factor in basically the non-consistency of this industry to really be successful within it. That's probably one of the biggest and most important tips and steps I could tell anybody who's operating in this industry. When it comes down to particular products, not having them be available and so on, as we mentioned before, there could be so many different reasons as to why that's occurring. During the pandemic, one thing that many people didn't realize, and it was a bit of a misnomer, was people, just the news and media, as well as just normal consumers, they wouldn't see a product on the shelf. They'd be given the explanation that, it's because of supply chain. And people automatically assumed that was a manufacturing issue. But really, in the end of the day, what that really was is that was a transport and logistical issue. Because what happened was that as we tightened down within our own country, as far as when people could go back to work or not go back to work and so on, that impacted, let's say, truckers who get a container off of a port and transport that to a final distribution site so that it could then be sold and so forth. Well, if truckers were not allowed to go back to work, or if they weren't allowed to go to the ports because there were significant restrictions, then it creates a backlog. And that backlog starts at the ports and then continues on to the containers that are sitting out in the water that even can't come into the ports, back to the manufacturers that have containers just sitting around in their warehouse that can't be picked up, back to then their inability to manufacture because there's no space to put the things that they manufacture and people aren't going through their normal sales cycles. So technically speaking, what was really a logistical and a transport issue was the vast majority as to why so many products were not able to be available during the pandemic time. Yes, of course, there were situations where particular materials, as you said, may have been reallocated for other purposes and things of that nature. But generally speaking, the vast majority of the kind of bottlenecks that we saw as consumers really were not necessarily manufacturing ones. They were those of more logistics. And we know this because other countries in the world who were not as restrictive were able to get their products and were basically being produced and so on and so forth. And what ended up happening is that the United States ended up having to buy products from those other countries. So they had to do like sort of a sidestep. So instead of, let's say, buying from Asia, they may be buying from Mexico or Canada or Africa, or places where the goods were able to get out, were able to be delivered, and then buying it basically from a destination site rather than from a source. But these are things that, again, you have to sort of understand the industry to know the inner workings of that.
I mean, it's highly interesting, right? It reminds me of that TV show that you watch where it's like you get to see behind the curtain of how things are made, right? And so to be able to understand how all of this flows across the globe and how things, really can be disruptive. Obviously, the pandemic was very disruptive for a multitude of reasons, but it's really interesting to kind of go into that. I think one of the reasons why I was so excited to have you on this show is because you mentioned the word supply and demand. One of the things that I see out here is the demand for healthy alternative for pretty much everything, or sustainable material for pretty much everything. Looking at energy efficiency and looking at just overall health and well-being, that demand is starting to increase. It's a bit tricky the way I see it, and I'm gonna call myself a novice of this. for all intents and purposes. But I do see that one of the challenges we have is you might have different regulations in, let's say, China. When they're manufacturing products, maybe they're allowed to use formaldehyde or have certain levels of formaldehyde, for example, versus the regulations that we use in our manufacturing process. And so I know that creates some challenges, but just I would love to hear kind of how you see this trajectory of health and wellness entering into the mix, longevity entering into the mix, biohacking entering into the mix. And how is that changing the landscape in terms of the supply chain?
Absolutely. So, I mean, great topics and essentially very, very instrumental in the realm of supply chain. So let's just begin with the basic beginning that we understand that transport and logistics is the 8th leading cause of greenhouse gases, right? But we are a consumer-based economy. We need to purchase our products. We need to have these products manufactured and so forth. And so where do we improve that? Because we're not slowing down as a population and as a global economy. So we need to have better practices in place in order to manufacture and transport in a safer, cleaner way. A year ago in Dubai was COP28, which was a UN-sponsored conference that was all about exactly this point, net zero. It was the first time that the largest logistics and transport providers, the Maersk, the Dwells, the largest groups got together and essentially committed to the idea that by 2050, right, which is not that far away from now, 25 years from now, that they would be looking to be sort of carbon neutral when it came to their transport. And we know that the United States government has invested billions of dollars in hydrogen hubs. We know that on the manufacturing side, we're looking at really unique, innovative techniques. Like, for example, perfect example is I was the chair of an event in Las Vegas recently called the Deliver event. If you're not familiar with Deliver, they put on an event in Las Vegas, in Singapore, and in Amsterdam. And the focus is basically people, planet, and being profit neutral. And their entire slant was on how do we network and how do we make this a more eco-friendly world. And you had Disney there and Walmart there and some of the largest organizations and companies that were talking about their innovations and the strides that they're doing. And the one thing that's overlooked oftentimes is package materials and the footprint associated with that. So everybody has the story, they get their Amazon package. They ordered this little tiny thing and it came in this really big box with a bunch of airbags and everything else. Well, that is a perfect example of not being, efficient or being, sensitive and sustainable. You're basically having waste with all that excess material, those plastics, those airbags, everything else. So there's technologies now, the utilization of AI and otherwise and algorithms that would say, okay, we have this item, it's this small, or 5 items that we need to put into this box, run the algorithm to show us how, like Tetris or like pieces of a puzzle, it can fit into this box in the way that will have the least amount of materials used, but give the maximum amount of protection. And in doing this, you reduce your carbon footprint by 30, 40, 50%. And the really interesting thing is many companies today believe that to be sustainable means that you're spending more money to do so, when in the end of the day, you're actually saving money by doing that. You're saving on the materials, you're saving on the weight, the dimensions, the transport fees, so many different elements that just are really coming to light now, where sustainability will equal to increased profitability and or reinvestment into more sustainable related activities. You talked about globally how there are differences in the world on materials that may be used and also potentially impacting air quality or other sensitivities. And that is really getting remediated as well through ISO standards. I mean, there are global ISO standards that are being put in place on manufacturers across the world that they have to abide by, particular parameters around regulations. And some of these regulations are around air quality. Some of them are around the actual sources of their energy and so forth, as well as the environments that they have for their workers and for their surrounding areas, dumping and hazardous waste and so on and so forth. And to this effect, just speaking about China, because we know a lot about that and we have a presence there, in the past 5 years, hundreds of thousands of factories have been shut down because they were not willing to shift away from, let's say, coal sources of energies to clean electric or different kinds of alternatives, because they have had environmental issues of their own, where they've had cancer clusters and all different kinds of elements that impact the health of not just their workers but their society. So we are working towards a cleaner world, and the solution is not, again, around reduction of manufacturing or reduction of development of our economies. It's around doing it in a cleaner, safer way that as we continue to grow and scale as the human race, we are contributing or even assisting our environment, giving it a chance to heal itself in any ways that we can while we continue to grow and thrive too. So, there's a lot going on here.
That's really exciting to hear about. I mean, all the different changes that are happening. I mean, I hate to see that factories are getting shut down and thinking about the families of the people working there. But that's where progress gets made, unfortunately. And of course, new factories get built in their place that are looking towards that future and doing things in a better way. So nice to hear the developments there. I've also, seen obviously this push for electric vehicles, including like electric semis, which obviously can help things improve our footprint there. We also see a big push on buildings for energy efficiency. We've got some nuances there. We've got to look at how we improve energy efficiency and also improve air quality at the same time. Because right now I see a lot of trade-offs there, but
Yes.
All good things as we continue to move forward. So it's exciting, and it's great to hear that the regulations are getting a little stricter from country to country, so we can bring in safer products here, especially related to our health and well-being and air quality and longevity and everything like that. I want to just go into, there are going to be people listening here that are entrepreneurs like you and I that are looking to innovate, that might have some fantastic ideas off of this. And now they have an amazing resource in you, Kerim, and everything you've built to go and make dreams come true. With that being said, someone who's listening to this that might have ideas of, building new products that don't currently exist that might help solve a problem with air quality or with health and wellness. Where do people really start? I mean, is it really as simple as saying, hey, I want to build this specific vacuum cleaner that can remove this specific size particle? Or what sort of research is really needed and development is really needed to kind of get started as an entrepreneur in this type of industry?
Well, you have to understand your resources. That's the first step. I mean, how much do you really know about the products you're trying to bring to market or produce? If you don't have the knowledge or the capabilities or the ability to research as deep or as wide as you need to, then you need to be able to lean on external sources or third-party outsourced providers like my company, the Atlas Network, to help you through that process. Because one of the worst scenarios an entrepreneur can have is to pick the wrong supplier, or to underestimate the manufacturing process, or to think that they can do it all when they really don't have to, and their efforts should go towards something else, like either the marketing or the sales side of their business. As entrepreneurs, we all think we want to be jack of all trades, master of none. We just want to roll up our sleeves and just get into it, right? And that attitude is a wonderful one, but at the same time, a very dangerous one that could bury your business, one that could essentially be able to really eat up your capital and eat up all your time and your resources, and have you not even be able to kind of get started in the process before you fail. So it's a little bit counterintuitive for entrepreneurs, but sometimes the best decision is to outsource that and to not take it all on your own. You can do your R&D and so on and so forth, but then you have to leave it to some level of the professionals. So what we do, to give you an idea, for entrepreneurs is we are their third party outsourced productions, operations, management team, right? Strategic partner. And we start by doing a requirements analysis. What is it they're trying to make? How are they trying to make it? Why are they trying to make it? What do the costs look like? Who are the competitors? How does it all kind of flow through? Then once you have an idea of something that could make sense to facilitate, who's going to now facilitate it? Who's going to make it? So we go out to a database. We have a database of almost 2,000 suppliers and determine the best, let's say 4 or 5, the brightest and the best in the industry with all their certifications and qualifications and a laundry list of historical business that they've done in that industry for top name clients, quantitative, qualitative factors, really look at the entire holistic picture on who these suppliers are, not just cost, but all those other things I just mentioned. Then you go through a sort of, crawl, walk, run process where you have to do prototyping and development, bring in these samples, have them be tested, have them be focus grouped, whatever else it is to basically know that this is something that people can use, they want in its current form, it's good. Oh no, it's too big, it's too small, it doesn't do what it's supposed to do, and tweak accordingly. And then you get to things like then the manufacturing process. And in the manufacturing process, you need to have visibility. You have to have eyes and ears on the ground. If you can't be there on site, again, a group like ours deploys teams out there in the beginning, middle, and end of a production to make sure that things are going well. You have to have the idea and mentality that every production is the first time because variables change, materials change, people who are running those lines change. And that can all have impacts to the actual production. So you got eyes and ears, visibility, third-party quality control. You bring in audit firms who are paid to find mistakes, people that are not associated with the process itself, whether it be the third-party management group or the factory itself, but a third party that comes in and makes sure you have kind of a clean bill of health. And then there's just the ticking and the tying stuff to make sure that it gets from point A to point B, which is the logistical side, making sure you're booking on the right routes and how to get it through and declared values and the customs clearance process. And then finally the delivery, warehousing, reordering, fulfillment. And it becomes, again, it's an ongoing cycle that's quite important. I call it, in my book, I talk about it, I call it the PPI pyramid, which is the procurement, production, inventory pyramid. And there are micro steps that happen during procurement, during production, during the inventory, and how it's inversely correlated between sort of supply and demand as you run through this cycle as a business. The point being is it's a lot. I just told you a lot of things that take a lot of expertise and knowledge, and you're either going to have to dedicate time, resources, employees to doing this, or to do it right, you're going to have to work with professional groups that have the experience to do it in order to have the best outcome. And that extra margin that you pay or consulting fee or markup or whatever else it is will be worth its weight in gold, because the alternative is to do things all, let's say, on your own with no knowledge, no recourse when and if things go wrong, and basically just burying your business before you can even get started.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like there's a lot of steps to this process if you want to go to bring something to market and do it properly without maybe bleeding yourself dry. And so it sounds like the Atlas Network, this is exactly where this company really comes into play and helps people go from ideation to actually execution, which is really a really cool concept. I'm glad that company exists and that you've helped create it. I want to just give people an understanding here. What does that process look like? If I have an idea for a product, for example, I come to the Atlas Network. I mean, I'm not going to have a product in my hand in just a couple of weeks, right? Like this really is a vetted process that takes time, and people should be aware of that.
Yes, it takes time, but if it's done right, and I don't like to pat myself on the back, but I will right now in saying that we do it fast. We do it faster than many others. And it's because we've done it for a long time and we already have the built out network. We know where to go, who to go to, and so on and so forth. But yes, I mean, something comes as an idea. It takes a period of time to get it to be something that could then be, let's say, a fathomable concept that could be presented to suppliers, whether it's prototypes or renderings or 3D drawings or whatever it may be. You get it to those manufacturers, and then it's a matter of them getting a clear sense of the materials involved, the time involved, and so on, then going to a prototyping stage. And then after you get through that stage and it's well done or tested, if it's like, let's say, a product for the food and beverage industry, it may have to have FDA certifications. If it's an electronics project, it may have to have UL or different kinds of EPA standards or whatever it may be. The product has to have testing and certification. But the manufacturing process itself, once you've buttoned it up and have said, this is the prototype, this is what we want to do, and it's been tested and vetted by all these groups, it's sort of the development phase, then the manufacturing process really isn't all that long and complicated as long as it's done with a great supplier. So the supplier selection process is very, very important up front.
Now, with Atlas Network, do you guys specialize in certain things like electronics, or do you pretty much run the gamut of anything that really needs to be manufactured and created?
You know, I would like to say that because we built the right methodology and because of the fact that we built a wide, diverse network of, I said, almost 2,000 suppliers, we can pretty much make anything. Now, through time, you do very well with particular projects. And then if you serve this critical strategic role, these brands want to sing your praises, and then they do it within their industry. And then you then have other players within an industry that continue to come about. So it was never really a scenario where we said, okay, we're going to make these kinds of widgets and that's it. Or we're just going to service this industry. That was never the case for us. It was always, let's do a manufacturing process which is based upon, again, proper supplier selection, on the ground visibility, third party attestation. And in the end, if we focus in on those things and build a robust network and a great business methodology, then we can pretty much make anything. Now, there are some projects that are just way too outside of the wheelhouse. There are some things that
Sure.
we may or may not feel comfortable. Either the suppliers aren't good enough or we don't have enough expertise in it. And in those cases, we'll have to push certain things away. But through time, we definitely have done a wide range amount of products, from consumer packaged goods to luxury goods to apparel to PPE during the pandemic to electronics and robotics and AI and even things like toys and children's products. So we've done a lot through this period of time. And I can't really say where we only play, because we've played in so many different places, but we do have the biggest portfolio, I would say, in the realm of consumer packaged goods. We have a lot in that industry. That's a big area of our business.
That's great. Yeah, thank you for that clarification. That's helpful for people listening who are like, you know what, I got to get in touch with the Atlas Network right away. How prepared do people need to be to first get in touch with the Atlas Network? How well funded do they need to be? Do they come to you in the beginning stages of the journey when they're a little more prepared and more in the middle, or even at the end when everything's ready to go and you help them kind of get it to market?
I mean, on our side, it's always better that the idea is a lot more baked and that obviously they have the capital to facilitate. Because in the end, what you don't want to do is you don't want to have sort of a boy who cried wolf scenario with these suppliers, or even with our teams overseas, our factory managers, our quality control managers, where someone comes to the door and say, I've got the greatest idea ever. Let's get to work, but I don't have any capital to do it. So now everybody's time has been a bit wasted in that way. You've put things out for quote or bid with suppliers who will never get a project. You've wasted, time, so on and so forth. So I would say we are happy to work with entrepreneurs who are at a beginning stage, but they have to definitely have some level of funding. They have to have some understanding that they're not going to be able to make 2 widgets. This is a scenario of thousands of widgets usually, unless it's like really, really high-end luxury products. And they have to be really willing to give their most important resource, which is their time, especially in the beginning when you're doing the development and the ideation and the prototyping and all these things. I mean, these things are going to require some back and forth requirements analysis and discussions. And that just doesn't happen by snapping your fingers. You have to have conversations. You have to work through things. So I would say a potential customer needs to have some levels of capital, funding, a clear-cut idea of what they want to do, maybe even some experience in doing those things. And outside of that, also have the willingness to be involved in the process, at least in the beginning stages, for sure.
That's really great advice. And I don't know if you feel comfortable saying this, but how well capitalized should people be? I mean, you already talked about minimum quantity order, about 1,000 plus that people should be expecting. Are we talking? I mean, obviously it depends on what you're manufacturing, right? I mean,
Thousands plus.
thousands, right? And
Yes.
so do people really need to come to the table with 250,000 plus, or 100,000 plus? I mean, any sort of range you're willing to give just to provide some expectations would
I
be
mean,
helpful.
it's really totally product driven, because you could be making 1,000,000 units of something that's 10 cents, and that'll be $100,000 project, right?
Right.
You could be making something that is 1,000 units where everything is $1,000. So
Right.
it's very difficult to kind of throw that out there. But I mean, for our standpoint, we pretty much take on projects that are north of $25,000 in total. I mean, that's pretty much for a very beginning stage sort of entrepreneur that's doing a small quantity of something. It just that's our sort of bottom end, 20 to sort of $50,000 range. And generally speaking, that is going to get you an MOQ production of something. And what that is, again, depends upon what those items are.
Got it. No, that's very helpful. I think, for people who have ideas, I mean, I certainly have a ton of ideas that I will be talking to you at some point offline about, in
Great.
terms of bringing some things to market that I think would be extremely valuable for people. But yeah, I think it's helpful for others listening who are like, hey, look, this is a big problem, right? There's tons of products out there, but my baby has sensitive skin, and nothing I can buy out there in the supermarket works. And it's kind of typically how these brainchilds start. It's like you're trying to solve a problem that nobody really seems to be solving. And so love all the information you've provided to anybody listening who is out there trying to solve a problem. Please do. I mean, there are so many problems in this world we need to solve. And so I thank you for giving people a platform to be able to go out and do that. I mean, I certainly wouldn't know the first thing about flying over to China and waltzing into one of these warehouses and trying to get something, created from scratch. And so the fact that you guys have all these suppliers lined up, you have all this invaluable information to give people the right head start here. I mean, that is really awesome. So thank you for all you've done and all you continue to do for people.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And the truth of it is the reason why I got into this industry is because of a lack of transparency. It's been a black box for a long time, where so many, small, mid-sized businesses, entrepreneurs got taken by groups that were not really suppliers. They were trading companies or middlemen who didn't really have the best interests of those customers at heart. Before I came to this business, I was a regulator. I worked at the NASD FINRA in the Sarbanes Oxley Group. Before that, I was at the Securities and Exchange Commission in the Office of International Affairs. So I was always looking at aspects of risk mitigation and controls and processes to help have the best and most efficient outcomes. I just took those experiences and put them to a different industry, which is manufacturing and global supply chain. But the intention has always been the same, to really be able to have a great outcome for these customers and clients so that they can thrive, they can, produce in the consumer economy, hire more people, have a successful business, and promote basically, global economics. And that can't happen if there are breakdowns that, come along because of bad actors or misinformation or lack of visibility. So I'm sort of like trying to be a champion of those things with what we do.
That's incredible. That's absolutely incredible. I have to ask before we wrapped up this podcast, we mentioned AI. Now, I was at an insurance conference a couple weeks ago in Vegas and trying to figure out how can we educate the insurance industry, try to had as many conversations as I can, almost like this little fact finding mission. And I couldn't believe that how much AI, boots were there. I mean, probably 95% of the boots were all AI driven technology platforms in that industry. And of course, you see that AI is pretty much taking over almost every industry in some aspect. You already mentioned how AI can be very instrumental with efficiencies, with packaging and things of that nature, which, by the way, as you were saying that, I was haunted by all those massive boxes I get in my 2-day deliveries when there's like a small little pill bottle in this like huge
Right.
box, right?
Right.
Crazy. So can't wait to see AI help out with that aspect. How else do you see AI helping to advance the future of the shipping and logistics and manufacturing industries?
When it comes to AI, I sort of think about this holistically. And it's funny, I wrote 2 articles for USA Today on this. One was a very pro and one was a very against AI because, the reality of it is, just talking holistically, is that we need to find the right balancing point where humans and computers can interact with each other to get the best outcome. When you tell me that you've got 95% of these boots that are on the ground that are AI solutions, that's scary to me. And the reason why that is because I believe that many companies are trying to play into the convenience factor where they say, oh, people they don't want to write anymore. They don't want to think anymore. They just want to push buttons and have, everything done for them. And that is not the right use or intention or selling point of AI. What it is to really be able to look at your problem sets that you may have and be able to run and operate at a scale that no human beings could do otherwise, to be able to generate scenarios where AI transitions from being a tool to actually being a teacher, where we can actually get so much information out of an AI system that we then can look at it didactically and strategically and say, wow, I never even thought that this was possible. But because it would have taken 6 months to figure that out with 20 bodies on it, but this program has gotten it to us in 10 seconds, we now have picked up all that time and go forward strategy to make a pivot or to make a shift accordingly. So I think that that's really important. The other side of it, though, is that AI without guardrails is like letting a monster out of the cage. And this is where I think there hasn't been enough emphasis on AI development and how it's basically protecting people. What do I mean by that? I mean that what goes for people in China is not the same thing that goes for the rules and laws of the United States or in Middle East or in Africa. And so AI is not a one size fits all. And in many ways, it has to also be looked at on like a geographic level and on almost an IP specific level, because there are religious norms, there are cultural norms, there are differences that could impact how AI needs to factor into its functions and its duties and its outputs and so on and so forth. That's more on the creative side I'm talking about than on the actual, ticking and tying, running numbers, algorithmic side of things.
Sure.
But, there's a balancing point here in many ways. I think that we need to be able to save enough room to make mistakes in AI. Some of our biggest breakthroughs come through the mistakes that we've made. And again, if we're just in the convenience era where we just want to have everything done for us, we may lose out on some of the biggest breakthroughs that we could have because we made some mistakes along the way. So AI has to be able to flex and be adaptable to errors and looking at errors not just as errors, but as potential possibilities. So, these are just holistically, fundamentally, some of my thoughts around AI pro and con. When it comes to the supply chain industry, they are running algorithms to find the most efficient routes. They call them like green corridors, on where the least amount of carbon footprint essentially is being, where you are having the least amount of a carbon footprint, and trying to take those routes rather than other routes, and then looking at what the environmental impact will be because of that. It's going into the realm of things like we said before, packaging and materials and landfills and so forth. It's going into technologies that are being used to recycle things like waste and byproducts to then turn them into commercial products or things that people can use every day. It's being utilized to purify and clean things like air and water and our environment, our natural resources. So I think that the benefits of AI are absolutely there, and for the supply chain space for sure, whether it's transit, logistics, manufacturing capabilities, reductions of waste, and new and unique manufacturing capabilities and materials. But the adoption of AI is the challenge. This is where I think the key challenge is going to be, where there has to be a proper tone at the top education within organizations to say, you're not going to lose your job because of AI. And as a matter of fact, this is how you're going to do your job so much better and more efficiently with these tools, and therefore generate levels of excitement rather than fear when it comes to AI. And that's going to take some time, because the solutions can be here today, but is everybody using them? That's probably a pretty unique study. And I've seen this at work where basically, in conferences where someone will say, who knows about AI? And everybody raises their hand. Who's using AI every single day of your career? And like 5% of people are raising their hand. Why? It's not because it's overly complicated. It's because there hasn't been enough transitional education to allow people to want to feel like they want to adopt it yet. And that's where you have to show benefits, real benefits that'll impact themselves, their family, their planet, their environment, their industry in a way that really touches home. And then they're going to want to grab it with both arms. But until you do that, it's just another technological widget that they're like, oh, this is just another thing I got to do. As long as it's that, it'll never really have its true capabilities in this industry or any industry.
No, I love what you said. I mean, obviously there's always pros and cons to anything, right? And, there's a lot of good things. And as long as we, adopt it responsibly, use it responsibly, I think we're going to see a lot of those benefits. But if we don't adopt it properly, we don't use it properly, it's going to create a lot more laziness, which we would not like to see, right? So love everything you said, love this conversation and everything that you're doing. And really appreciate your time here today. Is there anything else that we would be remiss to cover if I let you go before you said it?
I mean, my goal is to educate people based upon these experiences that we've had and I continue to have in this industry and in this space. The way I'm doing that is through my YouTube channel, which is Kerim Kfuri, through my LinkedIn page, through the social media side of things. And then also through this book, which I mentioned before, which is Supply Chain Ups and Downs. I believe that this is a great backbone, 150 pages for people, whether it's consumers or for students that are studying, supply chain industry, business people who I keep hearing about supply chain. I don't know what it is. I don't know how to work with it or what it all means, or even supply chain people in the industry that are very siloed. They just know procurement. They just know transit. They just have blinders on because it's a fragmented industry. I wrote this with those groups in mind. So that's at supplychainupsanddowns.com or on Amazon if anybody has an interest. And I think it's a good read, and it's fundamentally important. It's in the news every single day. So, knowledge is power in that way.
Yeah, I'm certainly going to pick up that book. Very excited to read it. 150 pages is not a terrible read either. It's not like it's 1,000 pages, right? And so I'm sure it's jam-packed with information. Has a lot of good nuggets in there. So I'm excited to read through it. Where else can people find you, your YouTube channel, your website, all of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So for the Atlas Network, our global supply chain solutions company, it's theatlasnetwork.com. You can see a portfolio of our work and all the things that we do. For my sort of thought leadership, it's basically my first and last name. So it's kerimkfuri.com. Then all the social media platforms, you just search on my name and you can find those, whether it's LinkedIn or YouTube or Instagram or any of that. And then, as I mentioned before, for the book, it's supplychainupsanddowns.com. Those are all the links.
Awesome. Kerim, thank you so much for being here with us today on this episode of Never Been Sicker. I know I learned a lot. Thank you all for joining us. I hope you learned a lot. And until next time, see you soon.